Evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you for joining us for tonight's event, Clash of the Conservatives, Is the Populist Project Worthwhile? Co-hosted by the Institute of Politics and the Chicago Forum for Free Inquiry and Expression. This is the first time that the IOP and Chicago Forum have combined forces for a public event, a demonstration of our shared commitment to the free expression and civil discourse. My name is Ahmad, and I'm a graduate student here pursuing an MBA and a master's in public policy. As co-president at the Chicago Forum Student Board and a regular attendee of IOP events, I'm excited to help kick things off tonight. Personally, I've always thought of the left as more divided and the right as more cohesive, so I'm interested to see where the disagreements lie within the conservative movement and what that means for its future, which is what tonight's conversation is all about. As part of that discussion, we're joined by two speakers. First will be Richard Hanania, a political writer whose readership has, at times, included figures like J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, and Elon Musk. He is the author of the book, The Origins of Woke, the founder and president of the Center of the Study for Partisanship and Ideology, and a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School. Welcome back. Next is John Carney, who leads financial and economic news at Breitbart. Before joining Breitbart, his career spanned in leading roles at the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and Business Insider. And finally, while he wasn't so lucky as to have gone to the University of Chicago, he did earn his JD from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Moderating tonight's conversation is Tom Ginsburg, faculty director at the Chicago Forum, and the Leo Spitz Professor of International Law at the University of Chicago Law School. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. First, and as always, please silence your cell phones. Second, we will have time for Q&A at the end. That'll be for students only, so keep an eye out for the microphones, which we will be circulating. And finally, if you are interested in attending more of these sorts of events, including one next week where we have Congresswoman Sarah McBride and Senator Lisa Murkowski, please visit politics.uchicago.edu and the chicagoforum.uchicago.edu. And with that, please join me in welcoming Richard Hanania, John Carney, and Tom Ginsburg.
I'll be on the end. Wow, the lights. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome Richard and John. Thank you both so much for coming back to the University of Chicago. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Tonight's discussion is, broadly speaking, about populism. We're going to get into some differences between these two and various aspects of American politics. But I wanted to start with a question on what populism is. What does it even mean to you? And I'm going to start with you, John. What is the populist project of which we speak?
Sure. Populism, the populist project, is a revival of American self-governance. I look at it as a rebirth of what Lincoln described as a government of the people, by the people, and probably first and foremost for the people. The American government had gotten very divorced from that idea. We had an elite that was no longer engaged in public service, but engaged in public management. What the populist project is an attempt to, in a sense, have a new deal for Americans, to restore the idea of the political sovereignty of the American people.
Richard?
So I think I come at this a little bit from a different perspective from John. My background is in the social sciences, so I'm looking at what's happening in the United States, and I'm looking for commonalities with what's going on abroad and the differences, of course. And the way I've tried to make sense of populism, what's happening in the United States, most notably with Donald Trump and the Trump movement, but also in equivalent movements in Europe and in developed countries, what we're seeing is basically a loss of faith in elites, loss of faith in experts, loss of faith in people who traditionally have had power, as far as really just people, everything from medicine to how you report on public events to economic views and everything else. So the way I look at populism, I see it as broader than just a political movement. I think there are populist and non-populist cultural trends and media sources. And I think if I have to define it, it would be somewhere in the sense of populism is basically, it removes the institutional barrier between the person with power. I think this idea that there was going to be, the people are going to govern themselves, I think that's kind of idealistic. I think it's what you've done is you've removed the institutional barriers, the kind of intermediate forces between leaders and the masses. So you take someone like Donald Trump, he wouldn't have been picked by the Republican Party, he would have been picked by a vote of any kind of elite, but he has a direct connection to the people. A lot of media sources are like this. You might read the New York Times, not for a specific author, but because you trust the institution. You would go to your doctor because he's been to medical school. And this is now, you can have your own medical advice straight to your podcast app. You can get your own media sources. You can elect the politician you want who nobody else in Washington might like. So I think that's what populism, when John, he says it's kind of return to self-governance. I don't know if we've ever had self-governance in this sense, but I do think it is democratic in a sense, whether that's positive or negative.
I don't disagree with you actually on the idea that inevitably you're led by elites. And I don't look at the Populist Project as destroying elites in any way. I look at it as the domestication of elites. That the New York Times is a great example. So the New York Times went from reporting to trying to lead its readers to conclusions. That it went from writing about the events of the day to conducting the 1619 Project. That this was a transformation in how they saw their mission. And we saw this not just in the New York Times, but in our government as well. I look at populism as a rebellion against that. As I said, a domestication of elites, trying to make elites serve the public rather than manage the public.
Domestication is an interesting phrase. So do you picture the New York Times still being there, but being a little bit more conservative, or do you picture replacing them?
I work for Breitbart News, so I think everybody should come to our quality product rather than the New York Times.
So do you believe that Breitbart is more objective and fact-based?
No, Breitbart has a point of view, and we are very open about our point of view. What we've actually tried to do is get others to admit that they have a point of view as well, that the mask of objectivity that they were, I think it's largely fallen away. I think 10 years ago, there was still a plausible mask of objectivity at places like the New York Times. I think that is gone. And it's very clear that they vigorously dislike Donald Trump. They vigorously dislike the deportation of illegal aliens, for instance. They do not like a Supreme Court that is empowering the president to manage the executive branch, or that overturned Roe v. Wade. They have these points of view, and it's very clear in their news coverage and not just in their editorial stances.
I want to come in on this question of populism. Of course, throughout American history, we've had populist movements. It's a kind of natural reaction when elites get too out of touch, and I think that's what John's describing. But from one point of view, populism is good in terms of mobilizing people, but not so good at governing. We have many populist governments which end up bankrupting things. I wanted to, maybe I'll start with you, Richard. As a social scientist, there's a huge social science literature on institutions and why they matter for development, for democracy, for human well-being. Is populism in its current form anti-institutional? And if so, where does that lead us?
So, you're right. There is a wide literature on this. Populism, Latin America has a long history of populism. It hasn't worked out well. I mean, there's empirical studies of this. And I think that it comes down to kind of, the question is, like, how bad do you think the elites are? Like, I think there are some situations in history, like if I'm a Soviet citizen in 1985, I'm not too picky about who's trying to replace the elites. I think I have a pretty bad system. And so when John says the New York Times is biased on certain political issues, he's right. I don't think it's ever said it was completely neutral because it has an editorial page and it gives opinions, but he's right. I think a lot of the 1619 Project, a lot of the reporting on what's been called the Great Awakening, I think that's been biased and kind of not fact-based. But the question is kind of what do you do with that information, right? The New York Times, these discussions always go back to the New York Times. It's interesting because it's just kind of a metonym. It's just like the symbol. But when I say New York Times, I'm speaking of Harvard. I'm speaking of all elite colleges and basically CBS and the main news, the legacy media and the traditional establishment, the two parties. And so the New York Times will have ridiculously biased articles. At the same time, we'll report on the latest research in stem cell therapy or the latest cancer research, or just like simple stuff like if you want to know the facts about what's going on in Chicago city governance, maybe you read the Chicago Tribune, but also New York Times will have great stories with that. I think that the populists, the mistake they make is that they get mad at some justifiable things, and the question becomes then what? And the idea that you can just, people can kind of choose what they want to believe or choose whatever sources rise to the top in a social media algorithm. I know that's not what they say that they want in effect, but I have not seen the alternative yet. Once you stop believing New York Times or the American Medical Association or the CDC or your doctor, I just don't see what replaces that.
So I don't think that we necessarily have to replace the CDC. What we have to do is change its leadership, which we fortunately have done. And so the Populist Project is not, again, about...
So RFK is better than...
far better than what preceded.
Okay, well, we have a...
There's a disagreement.
And what I would say also, I want to challenge this idea that populist leadership is bad or has a bad history. In fact, I think that American populism actually has a rich history. I wouldn't look at third world, Latin American populism at all for what American populism is. Andrew Jackson was a fantastic president, and he was a populist president. In many ways, Abraham Lincoln was a populist president. He had no credentials to be president. He was briefly a legislator and ran as the backwoods guy from Illinois, right? That this was not and on the other hand, the elitist project has failed for 20 years. I think we have been in a cultural and social Great Depression for 20 years. I could go through whether it's China's ascension to the WTO, the Iraq War, the financial crisis, the development of COVID in a laboratory, and then the lockdowns that followed it. All of these were elite leadership crises brought on by the elites. What we are doing is saying, that's enough of that. We need to take control back from these elites who have basically lost track of their mission, which is to serve the American public rather than manage it.
Okay, so I like that we've got at that difference. You want to replace them, and you think that the elites have not been, public-spirited enough, have been looking out for their own interests, have been imposing on the people. And then I like the fact that I asked you, okay, do you want RFK instead of the public health establishment? And you said yes. And presumably elites have been too selfish and too, uncaring what the American people think. And so Donald Trump is the alternative to that. Is that what you're...
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that they've been too selfish, though. I think that's a little bit of, people are selfish. I wouldn't say that the problem is selfishness of the elites. It is really a divorce from the ideas and interests of the American people. So when JFK was elected, 76% of the Senate had a bachelor's degree. Today, I think it's 100%, maybe it's 99%. Among the American people, it's not 50%, right? So over time, our elites no longer resemble the American people.
How many people, high-ranking officials in the Trump administration, don't have college degrees?
One, I have not counted all the people in the Trump administration. There probably are, but my point is that the character of our government changed, and their governance. So you weren't allowed to care about too many immigrants coming into our country. You were made fun of if you cared about factory jobs leaving and you were just a Luddite. If you cared about the traditional family, you were a bigot. If you thought that colleges shouldn't discriminate against people based on their race, you were a bigot. And yet the elites were, so they denigrated, declared as unimportant or illegitimate the interests of the majority of the American people, and yet they fetishized their pet causes, whether it was trans activism, whether it was diversity, equity, and inclusion. These mattered, and the cause of refugees, these mattered, these were everything. And Black Lives Matter was everything. But the interests of the American people, the majority of the American people, was nothing.
So, some of these issues, I would agree with you on substance. I think that they're the mood, though, of the kind of idea that America has failed miserably over the last 25 years. If you look at the recovery from the financial crisis, if you look at American living standards compared to Europe, the United States has been the economic engine of the world. And
if you define it materially, I will agree with you.
Okay.
And so I don't think
the elites have done a great job making America.
No, I don't think so. I think the American people have done a great job despite the leadership of the elites. But what I would say is that the Great Depression that I believe we have been in, the second Great Depression, is not a economic depression. It is a cultural, spiritual, political, and moral one in which people felt as if they had lost control of our politics and they could not tell why the things that were happening, like the admission of 12 million illegal immigrants during the Biden administration, why did that happen? Nobody was asked, no vote happened, there was no public policy change, and yet it occurred. Why did that happen? Because elite mismanagement. So what we have now is an attempt to restore the political sovereignty of the people, to try to undo the mistakes of the last 20 to 25 years, to, as I said, to introduce a new deal to end the Great Depression that America has been in.
It's interesting. So everything that's gone wrong in the last 25 years is something the elites did. Anything that has gone right.
But I mean, do you challenge? I didn't say everything.
Okay, but I mean, you put a lot of things there, like the Iraq War. Do the people who supported it, 75%, do they have any blame for the Iraq War, or is it just the elites, who are the Republican Party, many of them who are now?
Yeah, people aren't always right. That's not the populist position is not that everybody, the public does not make mistakes. The public elected Joe Biden. That was a mistake.
Well, so Joe Biden won 2020.
He assumed office.
Careful. Careful.
He assumed office in 2021.
I think you slipped up. Okay.
Yeah.
He did assume office.
As far as I know,
that part is true.
He won the election.
Yeah. I want to maybe back up from this and then come back. So, and it's really a kind of a question about changing your mind. So Richard, of course, you were a student here, and I'm not a big social media person. I checked your social media feed about 10 years ago or so, and I was like,
I'm not that old. I haven't been on social media for 10 years.
There was some point when I went on there, I was like, whoa, this guy is out there. And he sounded to the right of John, and including some kind of ugly things that you had. But I gather from my dip into social media now, you've changed your mind on this whole Trump thing, on MAGA.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can tell us why you've changed your mind and how you changed your mind.
So, when I was here at the University of Chicago, it was my favorite experience by far. I've been around in academia. And the great thing about the University of Chicago, I've always had right-leaning political views, especially on a university campus. I found a lot of people who cared about ideas, who were intellectual, and were, ideologically not far to the left. And so that was a great experience. And when I was here, being conservative basically meant the normal ideological stuff. This was how the country's changed in the last 15 years. It meant you were in favor of markets rather than redistribution. It meant maybe you believed in the traditional family over experimentation and social liberalism. You maybe thought global warming wasn't as a serious problem as many people believe. And I still believe a lot of those things. I still believe in most of those things. At some point, it became, you could have the conservative view on every single issue. If you thought, for example, that Donald Trump did not win in 2020, you were exiled from the movement. At some point, I thought when Operation Warp Speed happened, I thought, wow, conservatism was proven correct, because you had a lot of people who were very smart, who were right-leaning scholars, people like a GMU, like Alex Tabarrok, who said the FDA kills a lot of people because these liberals are too safetyist, they're too worried about something going wrong. You have this pandemic that's killing all these people. You just have to speed this up. Whatever you're doing, you have to kind of throw the book out the window. That was kind of the attitude of Operation Warp Speed. The media doubted Donald Trump. He got it done. It was a thing that saved millions of lives worldwide.
Kamala Harris said she wouldn't trust the vaccine.
Well, we'll get to that.
I agree with you on this.
Kamala Harris, yes, said perhaps a theoretical vaccine before the vaccine was developed. Then it became kind of like a litmus test that you had to think that the COVID vaccine was not good. And I said, why do I have to reject medicine in order to be a conservative? And so I've kind of turned against, I think I think most conservative ideas, a lot of conservative ideas are still correct. I think that this populist thing, I don't think there's any reason to believe that podcasters and social media algorithms, for all the faults that the universities and newspapers have, I don't think that could be the alternative.
Mm-hmm. John, you ever change your mind on anything?
I do, but I've been pretty consistent for quite a long time. I worked for Pat Buchanan in 1996. I traveled the country hoping to have him win the Republican nomination. But I've certainly changed my mind, but probably in a very different direction from Richard. If anything, I have become more populist over time. I'm a little less, I went to law school, as they said. I'm a little less textualist than I used to be. I am more open to the idea of that you don't necessarily have to read every statute just under a dictionary definition. So I know that's a very technical change, but I'm a little more open to wider readings of that. But I actually want to try to invite Richard to come back. You do not have to agree with everything that, say, Donald Trump says, or that that right-wing people on Twitter say, in order to be part of America's populist project. I disagree with Donald Trump. I think IVF is a terrible practice. Donald Trump welcomes it. He thinks it is, a fantastic way to increase fertility in America. He may be watching us right now, and I'm going to say, Mr. President, you are wrong on IVF. You should change your position. This is not a scary thing to do. The populist right is not a monolith. It's actually, to use the cliche, it is a big tent.
Can I ask about a couple of specific things? So, were you a Tea Party guy back in the day?
I was not. I left politics for quite a while. Mm-hmm. When the country decided to nominate Bob Dole, when the Republicans decided to nominate Bob Dole gave a speech at the Republican convention in which he more or less called the people who had supported Pat Buchanan, who was now backing him, he said that we were full of hate. And I thought, I don't want anything to do with this political party. I am going to remove myself from politics. I went to law school. I practiced law. When I became a journalist, my focus was on finance. I covered Wall Street. I was at initially a site called Dealbreaker, Business Insider, CNBC, the Wall Street Journal. And so I was out of politics. Okay. I came back because of Donald Trump.
So this is one of the reasons I was asking, because to those of us who have been following this populist movement, Tea Party clearly was a populist movement. It was the people as a construct, although the people is always only part of the people. We have to recognize that. But it was a populist movement, without question. Very successful one, at least in capturing the public imagination and feeding ultimately into the coalition, which won in 2016. I'm looking at the deficits. You're an economics writer. I'm looking at this deficits in the budget, the big, beautiful bill, and I cannot understand how someone could square those two positions. Can you help me with that?
We have tariffs that are bringing in a tremendous amount of revenue, so that is deficit reducing. But I will say I am not, one of my differences with the Tea Party and with what I would call the Paul Ryan wing of the Republican Party is that I am not a deficit hawk. People have accused me of being a modern monetary theorist, in fact, because I do think that the American people can support a lot more debt than traditional economics thinks. I don't believe in this idea that economists often insist that there be what they call a non-Ponzi assumption that someday we will pay off all of our debt. And I have to break it to my fellow Americans. When the republic ends, we will not end debt-free. There will be debt. And when the heat death of the universe happens, somebody will owe somebody else money. All debts will not be resolved until kingdom come. That is where not on this earth will the debts all be paid off. So I'm a lot less worried about the debt. I do think we should reduce the deficit. I do think Joe Biden's excess spending contributed mightily to the inflation we saw, but I don't think that it was one of the reasons I disagreed with the Tea Party. I thought they were too focused on debt.
Richard, what's the best policy on this administration? What's the worst?
I think one of the best policies was Trump listened to me on what to do about affirmative action in government contracting and through the DEI programs. I think this stuff tore the country apart. I think that it doesn't, it's an extra bureaucratic cost. I think it caused a lot of resentment. I think that it added bureaucratic bloat, and it caused a backlash. And I think it's a decent percentage of why we got to this point. So some really good executive orders that I wanted Trump to pass, and he fulfilled my wildest dreams on this account. I'll give him credit. I'm still there's going to be a lot that I like in the Trump administration. It's not a very easy thing where I run with my head, my hair on fire, screaming, everything here is terrible. There's going to be some things I really like, and then I think the stuff that's really bad. I mean, I think that John talks about immigration. I think low-skilled immigration has been actually a benefit to the country. We disagree on that, but I think what's even more important than that is high-skilled immigration. You look at America basically is the American economy is the envy of the world. It's basically due to big tech. Big tech is basically getting most of their talent, or a huge portion of their talent, from overseas. You look at the founders of the American, top companies, the unicorns, the ones that have the ones with the highest valuations. The numbers with immigrant co-founders are like 50%. And I think that this is kind of the headline. This is the engine of American progress. I knew they would go after illegal immigration. I know that they'd like a low-skilled immigration, but I think I underestimated the strength of kind of the ethno-nationalist component of Trumpism, and they really are going after. They're trying to basically, through backdoor, try to make the H-1B visa program. Although, if they actually do, this is a little bit in the weeds, but if they actually start selecting based on presumed salary, which is something they've been talking about, I've had not, it's still up in the air whether they're trying to kill the H-1B program through the back door, or they're trying to actually reform it in what could be a positive direction. I think the signs so far are not good. So I think this is the trade and kind of the hostility. John says we can get by with higher deficits. I think not if economic growth stops, not if population growth stops. That's going to make our problems much more difficult. So I think this is where Trump has failed. In addition to selling the crypto coins and telling the attorney general who to arrest and stuff like that, which I think is not good for our institutions.
John, why is he wrong?
He skipped the best policy of the president, which is reordering U.S. trade with the rest of the world. That is the most important thing that Donald Trump has done in this term as president. Everybody said there will be retaliation. The world will destroy the U.S. economy. Instead of retaliation, we got cooperation. So that is very important. And I think that bringing down, first of all, illegal immigration and is a huge accomplishment, very important. And then reformulating how we think about legal immigration, I think, is also very important. The attempt to expand who had permission to live in the United States against the will of the American people was a terrible mistake. I actually don't believe we will have zero population growth. In fact, I think that one of the reasons population growth, call it organic population growth, has been low is because we are substituting newborn Americans with immigrants.
How does that work?
I'll explain it. It's very simple. That if you have a tight labor market for young men, then those young men get married earlier, they have more children. If you have a thriving economy with closed borders, that's very important, because if you open the borders, then you do not get the tight labor market from the thriving economy, because people come in to compete for the jobs of the young men. When you have this is not my idea, it came from Richard Easterlin, and he thinks that this is what caused the baby boom. A lot of people forget that the baby boom was unexpected when it happened, and nobody still can tell you exactly why it happened, but it appears that having a growing economy with relatively closed borders was part of the key that led to a baby boom. And if we want to do that, again, if we want to restore American fertility, then what we need to do is have closed borders with a growing economy.
I mean, it's a story, but I mean, this is a story where you could look for evidence in the world. There are countries that don't have a lot of immigration who have much lower birth rates than the United States. Look, I mean, the low-skilled immigration, there's a lot of, I think this is a just so story. I don't think there's evidence for it.
I mean, you haven't read the literature, that's clear, because there is a lot of evidence for it.
What's the evidence?
Explain it to me, I just did. You
told me that you told me a correlation of 1 point in history in one country.
And it is the best explanation we have for. Here's how history works, Richard.
Please tell me.
We do not have. America is about 250 years old, and so when we look through things. So I'm a financial journalist. Very often when we say, "Oh, has this happened before?" It hasn't happened many times. So we look to the evidence we have. The evidence we have, rather than the evidence you might wish for, is that the baby boom happened while the economy grew and you had relatively closed borders.
It happened during black and white television. It happened during. I mean, this is not how you do social science.
No, you're incorrect. This is the social science.
No, that is not. So you're telling me an N of 1 is social science?
I'm telling you, when you have one example, you use that example.
I have a lot of examples. There's an entire planet.
Show me where else the baby boom has happened.
Show me where else a lot of places have had baby booms. I mean, a lot of people have had fertility collapse. A lot of them have had growing economies. Poland has a growing economy. It has relatively low immigration until recently, and they have very low fertility. I mean, I've just given you an example.
No, I'm asking what triggers a baby boom. I gave you the best evidence we have about what triggers a baby boom. And you said, oh, but there are other countries that this did not apply to. Yeah. Sure, but when it happened here, we know how it happened.
I'm going to step in so we can move on from the baby boom and just keep things flowing. So one concern, John talks a lot about the American people. One thing we have worried about since the Constitution is a fear of majorities. That majorities can override minority interests. They can trample on the interests of individuals and such. And this is one reason we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. I want to talk about the First Amendment a little bit. And of course, the Trump administration, one of the very first executive orders was restoration of the First Amendment and free speech and such. The administration then proceeded to ban the AP from a news conference because they wouldn't say Gulf of America, coerce various settlements from big media organizations with the threat of not allowing mergers to go through, attack universities, et cetera. How do you think that, can you defend the administration on the First Amendment stuff?
I think people are freer to speak now than they were under Joe Biden. I think that the destruction of the disinformation industrial complex that Joe Biden was running, a censorship operation that was a whole of government effort. Tearing that down has actually been a great victory for free speech. And Americans today,
I'm sorry, but the First Amendment, the core thing is that government can't impose a particular vision.
Which is what they were doing under Joe Biden when they tried to get social media to exclude people who had dissident views on health, on immigration, on almost anything. If you disagreed strongly enough, you could get deplatformed, and it was coming from the government. We know this.
Right.
And Donald Trump has undone that.
Okay. Richard?
Yeah, so this case that went to the Supreme Court about the social media pressure put on by the White House. There was a conservative Supreme Court. They basically rejected the idea that there was enough pressure for the lawsuit to go forward. I looked at the Alito dissent, and what they talk about, what Alito talks about, this is the one who thinks they should have ruled differently. What he says basically is what the threat that the Biden administration made was basically we might go to Congress and ask them to look at Section 230 liability. We might go and try to change the law if the companies behave irresponsibly. This was the extent of kind of the pressure. Maybe it's not good. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Okay.
That was not the extent of the pressure. If you talk to the executives of Facebook at what was Twitter,
well, yes,
they were barraged with government pressure.
They were
every
pressured.
day. They got hundreds of emails and phone calls.
Okay, you take the worst of the story of what happened during the Biden administration. I don't know how you make a comparison like this. How do you make a comparison to what's going on under the Trump administration? When the head of the Federal Communications Commission goes up there and says we can do this the easy way or the hard way. A lot of American people do not like the fact that ABC airs Jimmy Kimmel's show, who made an insensitive joke about the Charlie Kirk killing, right? You have basically reports that companies with sources in the White House are telling journalists that companies are basically being placed on a list as far as loyalty to the administration and then getting favors or not getting favors on that basis. You talk about trade policy. Trump kept a lot of the tariffs on China, and then when a CEO talks to him, there's it changes. So the idea that the social media pressure with the Biden administration, I think if you were a free speech person, you could see that. You could even acknowledge that was bad, and you could say we're in a different world now where there's no comparison. Would you defend that?
I think there is no comparison because I think we are in a freer and better world. I think the focus
So do you think the FCC behaved correctly?
I do. I think Brendan Carr is actually the best FCC chairman we've had since
So you think mergers should depend
That is not what happened at all. That is, in fact, he made an offhand remark on a podcast that
he did a media tour
that people then blew up about. Jimmy Kimmel is back on air. If we don't have free speech in America, why is Jimmy Kimmel on air? Why are all of the major networks still anti-Trump? Why, they are this concept that somehow Donald Trump has ended free speech. You can say it, but I do not believe that you could think it if you were paying attention.
I didn't say he ended free speech. I mean, there's obviously opposition to Trump, and we still have a First Amendment. That's great. At the same time, there is direct pressure from the White House, and Trump doesn't. This stuff is funny because you could look at people who defend Trump on social media or the internet. I compared what they were saying to what Trump himself. If you ask Trump directly, are you kicking people off the air because you don't like them? He basically says, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And then you have people go on Twitter.
Who's not on the air?
Jimmy Kimmel for a little while.
Jimmy Kimmel got a week's paid vacation, and you say that's the end of the
insane.
First Amendment.
If somebody was off air for a week because of Biden administration, you wouldn't say, well, he's still on air. That's okay.
I don't believe that. I don't believe Brendan Carr's comments forced ABC, Disney to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air. I think they decided that they did not want to have Jimmy Kimmel on the air because his remarks were evil and loathsome.
I see. Okay. I want to turn to universities, similar kind of dynamic. It's another free institution and a free society, in theory, that's been subjected to sort of unprecedented pressure. And it's true that Obama with the Title IX Dear Colleague letter and such, and Biden with Title VI, or Title VII, excuse me, also would make demands of universities which required them to respond to government demands. But we're seeing really a kind of unprecedented set of demands from universities. why is this okay?
The universities have lost track of their function in our republic. They are supposed to pursue the common good, and instead what they have been doing is pursuing a narrow agenda. And it's not to, look, universities, I think on average, the Democrats outnumber Republicans 12-1. When Harvard tries to ask, are there any conservatives on campus, they get like one guy who says, yes, I am a conservative, and there's not any. So the universities betrayed their public mission.
So I just want to tease that out. So the populist view of universities is that the demographics of the professorate in whatever fields they're pursuing should somehow mirror the American people.
No, it doesn't have to mirror it one for one. They just can't go as insanely away from American interests and the diversity of American thought as they did. I don't think anybody thinks that it has to mirror it, exactly, but there needs to be a corrective from the error that we've gone through, from the Great Depression.
Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is one of the areas I'm most sympathetic to the Trump administration and what they've been doing. The pressure on universities to achieve some kind of demographic balance obviously didn't start with the Trump administration. It's been going on since the Nixon administration. Funnily enough, I covered the history of this in my book. Basically, the Ivy League universities, Columbia, Berkeley, they were resisting pressure to have racial quotas and gender quotas in the early 1970s. Ironically enough, the Republican administration was pressuring them to do affirmative action, and the universities, these elite universities, were saying, we're not that kind of institution. Eventually, the kind of left-wing ideas about race and gender took over, and now the universities desperately want demographic representation. This stemmed from the Civil Rights Act. I think it's a terrible misreading of the Civil Rights Act in the plain text and the legislative history. And what Trump has done to some extent is go back and basically get us to the original meaning of the Civil Rights Act, which means you don't discriminate based on race, and none of this stuff of none of this stuff that reverse discrimination is somehow not discriminating. I think this is kind of Orwellian. When you have two candidates for a job, one has higher test scores than the other, you give it to someone who's the right demographic group. We know anyone who's in the universities knows that this is what's been going on. So that's good. Now, they took it a little bit too far. The idea that you're going to achieve demographic balance based on political ideology. Look, at least the old DEI stuff had a fig leaf in civil rights law. They tried to make that. There's no constitutional or statutory basis I've ever been able to find that gives universities the right to say you need more Republicans or you need more Trump supporters.
Sure, I think this gets to the concept of popular sovereignty. I think that the American people.
Wait a minute.
I think the American people have the right to say to a university that in exchange for public funding,
pass a law that says you can do that. There's no law that says you could do that. We do have.
You can challenge it in the courts, but I do believe that the American people have the right to say. And by the way, I do think we should pass this law.
Okay.
That we should. That the
Should
American
they do
people
stuff that you want to pass this law that is contrary to the law as written?
I don't
now?
believe it's contrary to the law.
So what is the legal basis of it?
The legal basis of it is that the administration can say, who runs the executive branch, and can say, we don't believe that you are actually serving the purposes for which you are receiving the funds. And so they are able to say, if you stop doing this, if you agree to stop being at war with the American people, if you agree to stop fetishizing one point of view and denigrating every other point of view, then we will be willing to fund you. So this concept that the American people don't have the right to control how public funds are spent, I think is radically, not even elitist, it's just radically oligarchic.
Of course they have a right, but the rights are, what they have a right to pass. They have a right to pass a law.
So your objection is not actually to what Trump is doing, but just that he hasn't yet, that Congress hasn't passed a statute.
No, it's both. I think on substantive terms, for the same reason I oppose affirmative action, there's no reason to think a meritocratic system is going to get you demographic representation or political representation. But yeah, it actually is, I think, a big deal that they're doing this thing without legal justification. So yeah, I would oppose it on both grounds. There's a strong, you have the moral case. Just going after the DEI stuff, you have the moral case and you have the legal case on your side. I think, just like with a lot of things, they've overreached.
a theme, of course, of the administration is the use of executive orders, which Richard has picked up on. One of them was directed, of course, to law firms, denying them what I think every lawyer would say is a basic right to appear in courtrooms and such. And that was a very effective political tactic. Is that a good thing, John?
I have to recuse myself from this question because of personal interest.
Oh,
So,
okay.
You work for a law firm?
we're in a public forum. I don't
Yeah,
want to discuss it exactly.
no pressure.
But I'm going to recuse myself. But I will say that the Trump administration is in love with executive orders. And I do agree with Richard that I would love more of this, even when it comes to the tariffs. I would love more of this to be legislated. I think that right now we're in danger of losing the tariffs to a court case. That would be a disaster for the American economy and the American people. Congress should do its job and pass the tariffs.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could talk. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we both agree that the government should follow the law. They should do things that, they should seek out their desired policies through the legislative branch. I will say just on tariffs, recently I've been looking into the China shock literature, this idea that the costs of trade with China were more harmful than many economists anticipated. And when you dig into the literature, you actually find that the people who write these things actually still think that free trade has been in the aggregate good for America. I don't think you'll find many economists who think that free trade has been bad for America. Even the people who are known for being critical of the trade with China are not endorsing Trump's economic policy. So on the substance of tariffs, yeah, I hope they don't. I hope they don't pass it, and I do think there is a strong case against them in the courts.
I think trade is freer now than it was before Donald Trump was president.
Is anything worse now under Donald Trump?
We have a president who has officially endorsed IVF, which I think is a very terrible development.
Okay.
Anything else?
His one mistake.
Look, there's plenty in America that could get better and could be improved. But when I look through, which Trump administration policies, I struggle to find anything that I think is has made things worse. It's almost all in improvement in every.
But that's like kind of what are the odds of that, right? Like if you find yourself in complete agreement with an administration.
But I've told you I don't completely agree with
you have one thing, right?
No, there's probably a whole series of things. I don't spend all my time thinking about it because what I'm concentrating on is what we can do to improve the governance of the American people, not trying to do the game of like, oh, I'm going to pick apart everything Donald Trump has done and try to find errors in it. I don't think that's especially useful.
No, but it's not about playing a game of getting Donald Trump. It's about if you think about these things and you're trying to think about improved policy, surely you must see some things that the Trump across so many fields, foreign policy, economic policy, social issues, there should be at least a handful of things.
Sure, I think we should have a wall across our southern border, and I think it should be 100 feet tall. It should be visible from the moon.
Right.
So that's a mistake as well.
I want to return the power to the people here and open it up for some questions from the audience. And I think we'll ask that you come and line up here and state your name. And if you've got a question, let her rip. So we'll go middle first and then over there.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dahlia. I'm a fourth year here studying psych and public policy. I'm also a first year MPP candidate at Harris. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have to thank Richard for illuminating some issues I would like to explore further. And trust me, I really can't believe I'm saying that. But to this idea that you have about like the people, like enforcing the will of the people on like these elite institutions, I would just ask, like when it comes to like a university, for example, like I go here as a university student and let's say I like the demographic of my professors. I'm not dying for many more Republican professors in my scope of teaching, especially if I think that the professors right now are just fine. Is my opinion, because I'm a student, like I'm the people at the school with those professors, like of any importance compared to someone who's like never gonna come here? Or like, no, because like the American people, like, is it always like the people writ large? Like, should we put this to a vote? Like, if they should change it, or like, should they just ask the kids at school? And then, yeah, okay. Yep. So that more in general, obviously not just about universities. And then just like really quick, like you say RFK, like you trust him more than who used to run the CDC, whatever. But like Donald Trump just got his COVID booster and his flu shot. But like if I lived in a certain state because I'm under the age of 65 and don't have any like pre-existing conditions, I would have to fight with my doctor to get a prescription to get a COVID booster. So like where's my will of the people in that circumstance, even though Donald Trump can get his? Sorry, that was really long.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a lot of beef.
But there's a lot of questioners. Maybe I'll take a couple at a time just so we can get through. So someone on this side.
Hi. First, Mr. Carney and Mr. Hanania, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Luca Proper Bowering. I'm a third year at the college here at U Chicago, and I'm studying public policy. I just had a quick question on something we hadn't touched on tonight, at least not very much. Following the death of Charlie Kirk, I'd love to hear from each of you, who do you see filling that vacuum in the youth conservative movement, if you could point to one or two people? Thank you very much.
And we'll take one more quick question, then we'll give it back to the panel.
Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Abraham Nguyen. I'm a first year studying molecular engineering. And my question is, what does it mean to be American and be a part of the American people? Because it's been a big discussion of tonight's topic. Thank you.
I'll start with the last question. I think citizenship is a moral calling. I think that what it means to be American is to be part of the moral community of citizens. And I think we've sort of lost that sense of communal purpose that nationhood requires. I think we're rebuilding it again, so I think that's terrific. I don't think we should ignore the views of students about what happens on college campuses. I think that it is very important. And in my ideal world, none of this would be necessary and universities would be completely free to run themselves. But they broke the law, and they, as Richard was pointing out, their misreading of the Civil Rights Act. So they were in violation of the law, and they decided to fetishize a narrow-minded group of point of views. And so they have to be brought back. But once we bring them back, I think we will restore once again, the independent. What we want is academic freedom, but we need the universities to respect their role of advancing the common good.
Yeah, so I'll start with, I guess, the American question. I think citizenship matters. I think it's, being part of this country, being born here, clearly. I don't think it's kind of as binary. That binary, I don't know if that's John's position, but I think that a lot of people do feel like immigrants who maybe don't have citizenship, maybe even crossed here illegally, who've been part of their communities for decades. I think a lot of Americans feel like very close kinship to those people. So I think it has to be more of a continuum, a spectrum, rather than something that's just binary, either citizen or not. I mean, I think most Americans do have some kind of humanitarian feeling, especially towards those who they consider a part of their communities.
I think that's right. I don't think that's a point of disagreement, that people who are longstanding residents of the United States actually do not like our system. One of my objections to our current immigration system is that we create a second class of people who are here only temporarily. I think that everybody who gets admitted to the United States should be admitted as a full member of our community, and not have somebody say, well, as long as you continue to work for this employer, then you can maintain your residency here. I think that's a terrible system. It reminds me of indentured servitude. We should abolish that, get back to the idea that when we invite people to come live in our country, we are inviting them to become one of us and not an other.
I wonder if either of you has a quick answer on the Charlie Kirk question.
Yeah, I don't have a quick answer. I think Charlie Kirk was a very important individual, a terrific spokesperson for the American right, and I don't think he will be easily replaced. But I'm sure, people will emerge. But I don't have. I wish we had. I could look down into the dugout and say, like, you're up next. But one of the terrible things about what happened is that's not the way life works, and there's not somebody we can just bring up as a replacement Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk was kind of a unique figure because he was kind of a, I think, buffer for a lot of extreme tendencies among young people. So, some people, they would come up to him during COVID and, they would say, they want me to take a vax, I'm going to go, shoot the CDC or something like that. I mean, just kind of extreme, crazy stuff we saw during COVID. And he would he would just be like, yes, the medical health establishment, tyranny, they've been doing all these things. I think that he was kind of a good kind of weather vane for where the conservative movement was, very good at being close to the Trump administration, sometimes changing his mind based on direct pressure from Trump. He was uniquely good at that. I think that the people who are kind of more influential, I think somebody like Nick Fuentes is kind of becoming somebody who's being much more popular. Not good at playing the political game in the same way, but I think that the kind of people who are popping up on social media, who are popping up as influencers, they're in many ways a lot more extreme than Charlie Kirk, and that's probably what we're getting next.
Let's take a couple more questions. Try to be quick over here.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm a 1L. I have so many reactions to this very weird conversation. First off, John, your apparent hatred of IVF I find deeply disturbing. I'm a product of IVF, so again, I find it very
I do
offensive.
not hate you.
Well, it's still kind of weird.
I understand. It is a hard teaching, and
well, I'm not finished with my question just yet. Thank you. But again, I'm a product of IVF, so I think that I'm pretty okay. Again, this entire thing kind of confuses me. It seems to me that you and folks that share some of your political views genuinely enjoy having this country divided so deeply, and I'm just curious why that is.
Question in the middle.
So my name is Yash. I'm a junior. My question is mainly directed towards Hanania, but anyone feel free to comment. So I know, Hanania, you've critiqued the woke right before, whatever term you'd like, post-liberal right, populist right, whatever. But it seems to me pretty evident that when we look at the political situation in America, that most of the moral fervor and institutional capture happening on the right wing is happening as a result of the woke right. So what do you think they're doing correctly? How do you think that they have the kind of physiological impetus to capture the institutions and people? And do you think that you're failing to address a specific thing that they're saying? For example, by saying that there's a lot of people who during COVID were threatening to shoot up the CDC at Charlie Kirk questionnaires, which I'm not really sure that happens.
Okay, one more here, and then we'll turn back.
Hey, my name's Nathan. I'm over at Harris in the Public Policy School. I don't have a shovel big enough to dig through all the stuff I just heard, so I'll distill it down. Your views on IVF are unpopular. More people agree with IVF being popular. So you would encourage the president to take an unpopular opinion. He's a populist president. I'm kind of curious on that. But what I would really like is for you to kind of explain to your typical American conservative farmer from the Midwest, probably a soybean farmer, who is now seeing $20 billion in treasury swaps go to Argentina, who is selling soybeans to China as a result of Donald Trump's tariffs, and wondering, why am I being punished for this, and why are my tax dollars, which, let's be honest, those are subsidized, incomes for farmers, because, that's how our country works. We subsidize that. Why they're seeing their money go to Argentina and not be spent here in America, because America first.
All right, let's have, you can answer any of those you want.
Let me start by the young man in the red shirt. I'm not sure about that either. The people coming to Charlie Kirk event saying shoot CDC. That might have been a little bit of hyperbole. There were extreme things, but I don't want to be held to that. So thank you for pointing that out. But then to your the more substantive question, as far as what is the populist right, what is the post-liberal right doing well? I agree with your characterization of kind of where the energy is. That's unquestionably true, and I think that it's a consequence of basically the populist era. I think social media has come along, and if you go on social media, I think it's kind of lowest common denominator politics. I mean, if you go on Twitter right now, ever since they got rid of the censors, and you say anything, the most common response is that you're a stupid, ugly Jew and go get vaxxed again. And I'm not even Jewish, by the way. I am vaxxed. And this is like, there's a lot of people who are like this. You look at the top podcasts in the country, there are people who are out of their minds. I mean, Tucker Carlson is the #1 news podcast in the country. This man believes he's being attacked by demons in his sleep and that UFOs are coming from another dimension. And so this is why I'm not a populist. Like, I think people are very, very wrong. I have, this purity of the people thing I've always associated with the left, which is why I was a conservative in the first place. So, I might be, the tide of history might not be with me. I acknowledge that. The developments in communications technology has led to some kind of democratization, and they may very well win. It doesn't mean that they're correct.
John?
I want to say I think we are in for a populist tide in the United States, but all over the world, and people should get used to it. It is going to be they won't win every election, but it is going to be a large feature for the next 25 years of world politics. And I don't think populists, conservative populist nationalists are trying to divide the country at all. I actually think they are saying that the country has been divided and it needs to be repaired. So I don't see our agenda as divisive. I think that it is actually a unifying agenda. And we saw this in the election, where Donald Trump did much better than he was expected in lots of demographic groups that the left-wing elites told us would never vote for Donald Trump because they assumed that those demographic groups shared their view of Donald Trump. Donald Trump said, no, I want to be a president for all Americans. So I think it's a unifying message.
Let's have another round.
Hi, my name's Tyler Shastine. I'm a 4th year in the college studying economics and law, letters, and society. You can both comment on this. I'm interested in your thoughts on the MAGA view on the Middle East situation, how that's kind of evolved a lot recently. Obviously, you have thought leaders on the right like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, at least that a lot of people in the MAGA movement look to, who are increasingly critical of the government of Israel and increasingly sympathetic to a Palestinian state. Richard, you tweeted 2 days ago, you linked to a tweet, you tweeted if Trump's critics have to acknowledge success in one area, it's the Middle East. Today proves this again. You linked to a story you wrote where you said last week, I wrote about how Israel needed to destroy the idea of a Palestinian state. So I'm just curious, both of your guys' thoughts on how the MAGA movement and kind of America, young people at large, have changed their vieys on the Middle East.
So
we'll take a couple more if that's okay. Unless you want to jump right in on it. You can if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I could. I think that basically it's not the foreign policy and economics are not core to Trump's base and what they care about. They care mostly about immigration. Now there is this kind of ethno-nationalist, even some kind of sometimes anti-Semitic, anti-interventionist wing, and that has an influence. But I think that Trump, basically, you're getting a movement that is against immigration, that is just kind of generally anti-DEI, anti-elites. So do I expect Trump to be, pushing for a Palestinian state or anything like that? I doubt it. I think he's more influenced by the people around him, like his son-in-law and Witkoff, who are very strong Zionists who believe strongly in supporting the Israeli position. So that's what I would expect from the Trump administration.
Over here.
Hi, John, resident at the hospital. Quick question. I'm actually very liberal, but I actually think one area the Democrats really struggled was, and they lost all the blue-collar voters from the Rust Belt, because they did believe in globalization, that everyone would become wealthier as a result. Now China's taken that role, and they're seeing massive economic boom through industrialization. They can build trains, we can't. They're building housing, we aren't. So do you see any vision where there's an actual abundance agenda from the left? And to your point, there's this comparison. China's run by engineers, America's run by lawyers, and so we litigate everything. They build things. Do you think there's ever a future where if we are ruled by a country of elites, maybe we move towards builders and idea thinkers rather than people trying to shoot everything down?
Why do we have one more here?
Hi, I'm Phil. I'm an economics student. This question's more for Richard. I'm sympathetic to your Elon theory of everything and the cat turdification of the discourse. My question is, I think it's obvious that the elites became discredited in sort of the eyes of the middle American prior to Elon buying Twitter. I think Trump's election, but that was also preceded by Occupy Wall Street and Tea Party on the other side. So let's stipulate that for whatever reason, you gain control of Twitter, which you can use to, throttle traffic to all these, populist accounts and whatever. Why think that if we bring back the gatekeepers, the exact same playing out of history won't happen again, where, the elites, the ideological divide between the elites and middle America hasn't changed. So if you think that they should be in control of more of the discourse, why wouldn't they become discredited once again?
So, that kind of the framing of the question is kind of like anything that happened was going, anything that was before that you think was better led to the thing that you think was bad. So therefore, no, I think that actual choices people made make a big difference. So there's some things where I think the elites did get a lot of pushback from the masses for genuine disagreement. So like on DEI, I think immigration is a big one. I like high levels of immigration. I have to admit that that's something that people really, really don't like and created a backlash. At the same time, there are a lot of views that are just getting more popular because people have access to social media. You look at, I was looking at some polls from the early 2000s, and anti-vax was always very popular. I mean, the idea that vaccines cause autism, 15 years ago, 30% of the public believed that already. And, not 30% of the journalists and the media and the elites and the politicians, and that's, I think, was a good state of affairs because that position is wrong, it's been discredited, and it's great that, that's not presented as a credible view. Now we have these things that people believe, and unfortunately, they're able to kind of organize and exert political pressure. This is a global phenomenon. It's a technological phenomenon. I don't have, some kind of answer where you pull a lever or push a button. I don't think it's as simple as the elites just need to do better, because there's a lot of false things that people believe without a lot of evidence just because it feels good, and that has to be taken into account. And so yes, better elites. At the same time, we do have to think about kind of the structures of the informational environment.
I wanted to just touch on the question that came before that, which is, I was very encouraged that Joe Biden did not undo Trump's tariffs. He could have, with the stroke of a pen. They were signed into with an executive order, and Joe Biden could have undone them. He didn't. So I do think that there is hope that the Democratic Party will also join the cause of economic nationalism and divorce itself from the globalist elites. I think that would be great, and I don't think it will be easy. My Democratic friends, it was a long struggle in the Republican Party between 1992, when Pat Buchanan declared he was running for the Republican nomination, and 2016, when Donald Trump was elected. So my fellow economic nationalists among the Democrats, you will have to fight to win your party back to the cause of America. But we did it, and I believe you can too.
Let's have 3 more questions here on this side, please.
Hi. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much, both of you, for coming. It means a lot that you're willing to engage with the community and college students. My name's Cademan. I'm a first year at the college. And my question is about universities, predictably. But a lot of the issues, I think we can agree that the Trump administration and conservatives in general have had with universities have been surrounding DEI, social policies, affirmative action. And a lot of that stuff has been coming out of humanities departments, English, social sciences, psychology, etc. But the biggest areas in which the Trump administration has hit universities have been in the areas in which they're getting the most funding, which is scientific research. And so there's a lot of concern, I think genuine concern, that America's been the leader in biomedical research in the world for the last 50 years, and that's been a pretty great thing for the American economy, for American innovation. And so, when we have politicians saying things like transgender mice are transgenic mice, and there's a clear lack of understanding about what's going on at the scientific level, then what's the breakdown on that? Is it really okay for the administration to punish universities by exclusively going after science rather than the people they're mad at?
Here in the middle.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys for coming. My name is Will. I'm a fourth year. I study math and philosophy. I wanted to ask a question about an assertion that you, John, made about freedom of speech being better in the Trump administration versus the Biden administration. I want to preface, I'm a conservative. I was very aggravated with the cancel culture from both the Biden administration and the social media companies when I was in high school. But I wanted to add an anecdote, which is...
A quick one, please, quick.
Yes. I have a friend who's an international student, who's also a conservative, who said that he now feels that he cannot speak his mind politically because he's worried that his visa will be taken away. And to me, that seems like a new level of cancel culture because it's not being wielded by private companies, it's being wielded by the government. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
And we'll have the last question also right behind you.
Hi, thanks for coming. I'm Sonia. I'm a 1L at the law school, and I was just wondering, for Richard, what, if any, elements of a college applicant's personal background do you think should be considered in admissions? And also, in particular, do you think that gender should be allowed to be considered in private university admissions?
I'll answer that first. I'm a libertarian, so actually, like, my ideal system would be you'd discriminate based on anything you want. If you wanted men, if you wanted women, if you wanted Christians, if you wanted Muslims. If I was running a university, I don't know. I think that, like, and as far as public universities go, I think we are very bad. I don't trust institutions to say, Tom, you got picked on when you were a kid, and me, I was an immigrant. Let's weigh these things and see which one, has an advantage. I just don't think we're suited to do that. I think you need objective criteria. So ideally, you would make it as objective as possible with a reliance on standardized tests. Sure, if someone won a Nobel Prize or something like that, you could consider it. But in general, like, I do not like the idea, and I don't think it's. I think that's easily gameable, and I don't think that we're very good at kind of having a cosmic idea of somebody has overcome something or something. There could be an extreme case, someone was like, born without eyes and without ears, sure. But, barring that, we all have stuff that we went through in our life, and I don't think this is what universities should necessarily be doing. Was there another part of your question?
I was wondering, in particular, do you think gender should be allowed to be considered at private universities?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that gender is a special case because, I'm a pronatalist. I think most people are heterosexual. They want to pair up. Women, there's only two sexes. We don't have to worry about which races get the preferences and which races don't. So I don't have a problem with it.
John, do you want to take any of the questions?
Yeah, I want to say that I hope I'm sorry that your friend feels intimidated. That's a terrible development, and I encourage you guys reach out to me. Yeah, we'll write articles. We'll publish them on Breitbart if they're great. I think
and
that
we'll deport you. Be careful.
No, I think that they'll have to be really great. But I do think we want free speech in America, and we don't want people to be intimidated. And as I was saying, I think everybody who we decide to let live in the United States should be a full member of our community and have all of the rights that they have. Right now, our system is broken, where we have created a second class of citizens, and we do not. That is profoundly un-American.
Well, I know there are more questions, but we're out of time. So I'd like you to join me in thanking Richard and John for being here tonight. Thank you.